Welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we cut through the bullshit
Greggy,
so we can get naked.
you can't say that.
Why not? How would you say it then?
Well, maybe more like, welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we undress emotionally so we can undress physically.
That's exactly what I said. Not sure what the problem is. Welcome to episode 20
of Undressing Intimacy.
All right, y'all. We promised something really exciting.
We are about to deliver.
It's going to happen. I think I haven't been this nervous in a very long time.
I know I have butterflies in my stomach. I'm feeling a little jittery and excited.
There might be a little fangirling going on here.
A little. I think
Jennifer
more like
Finlayson-Fife.
a lot.
All right, but before we get to Jennifer, please pause and go sign up for our workshop
At langfordlifecoaching.com/Valentine's.
This is going to be different than any other workshop you've ever been to. We're working really, really hard to make it hands-on. We want to be able to get you things that day that you can apply to your marriage and make it better. So we're working hard to get there. We want you to be there. So go sign up.
Like now.
Before then, we want to talk a little about the topic we're about to discuss.
So today we asked Jennifer to speak on a pretty specific topic around marriage. And that is when couples reach the point of deciding whether or not they want to stay married. And specifically when one spouse does and maybe the other doesn't or can't. And we realize that many of you may not be at this point in your marriage, which is delightful and wonderful. But also, as we have this conversation, we really feel that you will have so many takeaways about how to create more honesty, how to be more self-centered in your conversations, how to tolerate the anxiety of being in a marriage, and how to create more intimacy, period. So we think there will be so many amazing takeaways, even if you aren't at this specific place that we're talking about in this episode with Jennifer.
Don't tune out. Without further ado, let's get to it.
Enjoy.
I can't begin to tell you how excited I am to have Jennifer Finlayson-Fife on with us today. I'm trying not to fangirl out a little bit here. Jennifer has been a huge part of our lives. I've talked a lot about the moments of my life when I realized that my sexuality wasn't bad. When I was sobbing on the tarmac in Salt Lake City, it was Jennifer who I was listening to. And we talked about a lot of things that we've learned. I really feel like we are practitioners of what Jennifer's taught. She really has changed our lives and has set us in a direction that is unbelievable. And we use her teachings all the time in our work. And so we are so excited to have her here. And I'm a little jealous because Amy has actually met Jennifer in person and I have not. So I don't know if you're a hugging person, Jennifer, but when we do, you're going to get one.
Hugs too.
So I'm just so grateful for everything you've done. So Jennifer, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. So I'm Jennifer Finlayson-Fife. I grew up in Vermont. I got my PhD in counseling psychology at Boston College. And I have really made a career in working. Well, I started by writing my dissertation on LDS women and sexual agency and really looking at, did women growing up in a more conservative patriarchal faith have the sense of belonging to their sexuality and their pleasure in the way that their partners did. And so that's where my work started. And it apparently there was a real need because once that, the internet happened, very interested in understanding that research. And so I just started doing more work within the LDS community, starting with women, but then starting to work with couples and men around how to create more intimate marriages. It's been very rewarding work. I do podcasts and courses and all that. And so, yeah, it's been a great
Where
thing.
do folks go to find all that wonderful stuff?
Finlayson-Fife.com. So I grew up as a Fife. My husband's Finlayson and we joined our names. So I'm Finlayson-Fife.com. Yeah.
Yes, and we have taken many of her courses.
Yes.
Like I said, changed our life. So go up there. There's great resources, and we love it.
I have to admit, we first need to apologize to Dr. Jennifer, because at first, when we started listening to you and taking your courses, we used them as weapons to prove how right we were. And we did
You're
it
not
all the
alone.
wrong way.
Yeah, exactly.
We actually had to put you in timeout for a
We
while.
did. It was because you were really getting to like the root of where we were struggling, and it was so exposing that we kind of went into defense mode first.
Sure.
And then when we came back to you the second time, it like Greg has said, has been life changing. We've taken your enhancing sexual intimacy, art of desire, art of loving, your relationship course. In fact, we're in your webinar again right now. I've taken your women's groups 2 times, which I love watching you in action. Love your Room for Two podcast and have been on it. And actually, being on that podcast, you helped us sort out an issue that was one of our biggest conflicts, and we couldn't get through it. And so I first want to say we owe such a huge debt of gratitude to you for your wisdom and insight and courage to speak to topics that are difficult and aren't spoken to. So you were kind of like this leading voice in the especially in the LDS community. But secondly, I want to just personally thank you, because the impact it has had on our marriage is just so profound. I don't know that I could ever thank you enough. So
that means a ton to me, and I don't know why I get to be so fortunate to be in the position to help people like that. But I'm grateful. I'm so glad it's made a difference.
Yeah, we've been able to see the taste of ourselves. So we started coaching folks and holding podcasts and stuff like that. And we get that side of it now, and how fulfilling it is. We're really excited to have a great topic today with you. So Amy, do you want to introduce that for us?
Sure. First, I want to start off by saying the principles that you teach, for example, more honesty, more truth, how these create more intimacy, self-confrontation, addressing losing strategies and turning them into winning strategies. All of this is just so foundational. And as we coach with couples, we see that this really does make a change. And we have had so many couples declare things like, this feels like a new marriage. And some of them have got new rings or started over. And that's amazing. But we also find every now and then, it is more rare, that there are marriages where one person is self-confronting. They are being more intimate. They are bringing more honesty. They are bringing more truth. And the other spouse, for a variety of different reasons, maybe trauma, maybe infidelity, maybe health, maybe just absolute fear, isn't wanting to step up, isn't wanting to choose. And we see these clients in this very difficult position, just straddling, like, what do I do now? And it's not a lack of self-confrontation on their side or blindness, but they really are presented with a really difficult choice. And I want to speak to these clients because I don't know that they get a lot of time or attention in the discussion of marriage and couples. And I think they face this really difficult choice of, can I stay in this marriage knowing that it will likely never have intimacy or the connection, and there's a certain pain and loneliness in that? Or do I have to accept that this isn't possible and I really maybe need to make a different choice and move on? And it's such a soulful, deep, difficult choice. I wonder how you help clients determine how to move out of that position of straddling, and how you direct them either way, like how you help them find that guide for themselves.
Yeah. Well, let me first say, one of the reasons why I think it tends to get less attention is because we really prefer the idea of like 7 steps to more intimacy, the 3 things you can do right now to to make your life better. It's the harder aspects of life are often tolerating what we don't have control over. And we often prefer, if I self-confront a little more, if I say this in a different way, if I do this thing a little better, then my spouse will love me. Then my spouse will desire me. And of course, sometimes that's true, right? Sometimes we are, often it's true. We're participating in a dynamic where there's some good judgment in a spouse not choosing us. And so we have to clean up our side of the street. The challenge, of course, is when you have actually cleaned up your side of the street, and no one's ever done it perfectly or anything, but that basically the issue isn't that it needs to get cleaner. I think that's the way to say it.
Yes.
Is that the reality is you're with somebody who is using your flaws or using their fears to not step in. And
Mhm.
the truth is they don't have to. It's not
Right.
like,
Yeah.
the morality police are going to show up and make your spouse choose you.
We'd like
They
that,
get,
wouldn't we?
I know, we really, really would. And the point is they get to decide how they want to live their lives. And a lot of
Mhm.
people want intimate marriages, but a lot of people don't. They want a practical marriage. They want to raise their kids. They don't want their spouse to leave. They don't want their spouse to be unfaithful, but they don't necessarily want to really partner, really create an intimate marriage. And
Mhm. Or
it's
sometimes they inherently can't. Like I have seen, different health conditions or different
I
or
think can't.
extenuating circumstances that they didn't even choose that make
Yeah,
it difficult.
I think that's right. But can't feels a lot different than won't to the person on the
Yes.
other side. Like if you really believe my spouse is literally unable to, okay,
Mhm.
they cannot lean into this marriage. They cannot.
Mhm.
It's not an issue of fear. It's an issue of they cannot. It's a different
Mhm.
decision than they will not. They're
Mhm.
going
Yeah.
to prioritize their fear. They're going to prioritize the default control because the person that's got lower desire for anything in a duality has default more control because you can't force the other person to do what you want. And so that means, you know, if you have a couple and one wants a baby and one doesn't, the one who doesn't want the baby is going to win, right?
Inherently has the
Right.
control. Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of times people take advantage of that. You can't make me
Right.
have a baby, so I don't care what you think. Or you can't make me have sex with you, or you can't make me desire you at a minimum. So I'm not, I'm going to take advantage of my inherent greater control. And that's really harder to settle down around as the person on the other side of that because it is relatively easy when you're the lower desire person in anything in your marriage where you can't agree to disagree on it. Whether or not you want it, you have more control, and it's easy to take advantage of that fact.
Mhm.
And so, what does the higher desire person do? Because they have less control. And so it's easy to think, okay, if I do all these things, I will get them to want to do it. I'll get them to choose.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
We wanna get rid
So
of the risk that's inherent in there that they won't.
yeah, and the truth is the thing that's so precious about being chosen in your marriage, about somebody really stepping in with their whole heart, is that they don't have to. It's not
Right.
because you're
It
so
really is a
great.
choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is a choice, and they've really chosen something that's made your life richer and better. And um, it's a grace in a way.
Right.
Mhm.
It's a gift. And
Mhm.
sometimes the most precious things in life are the things you can't control having. They just
And
come to fortunate.
I found one of the hardest parts is getting a couples to understand that they do have a choice, right?
Mhm.
And to put leaving the marriage or divorce on the table. Oftentimes, I committed to God, or I can't do this because it's going to
Mhm.
look bad. And I
Right.
really think until we get them to say this is an option, then they're
Right.
not really choosing anyway because they're
I agree
they're
with
just
that. Yeah, exactly. So that's true too, because a lot of times the higher desire person thinks, well, I've chosen you. Why haven't you chosen me? And sometimes that's true. They have. They really are saying, I choose you. I love you. But a lot of times they're just higher desire for more connection, but they don't dare choose differently. And so it isn't really a choice. It's more that they feel desperate for love and desperate for
yes,
Mhm.
yes,
uh, this marriage to fulfill their dreams because they cannot consider another possibility. And so this points right to the question or that you initially asked, Amy, which is like, how do you help people like that? I mean, you have to help the higher desire person understand that they are making choices, and are they choices they can live with. I remember talking to a woman years ago when I was first doing counseling, and she was in a relationship with someone that just treated her really poorly, gave her
Mm.
crumbs, and then sometimes was quite cruel. And she was just so enmeshed psychologically. And so she was always sort of imagining later she was going to have the courage to do something different. And I can't remember all the specifics of this, but I remember just sort of saying to her, it sounds like being treated like this is preferable to you to the discomfort of being alone. And it wasn't like
Mm.
I was telling her what to do. I'm just making an observation. Instead of you're straddling, you're actually making a choice. You're saying I
You are.
prefer this treatment over the anxiety of departing. They didn't have children or anything. It was just a relationship that was a couple years old. And
Mhm.
the next session she came in and said, I decided to leave. Like, I can't keep doing that to myself because we tell ourselves lies to not have to grow or change. We tell ourselves things like, oh, he's going to change. She's trying. I just have to be patient, but that's because we don't want to face. And sometimes patience is right. When your partner really is stepping in and trying, and they can regress, and they have, they have anxieties they're facing, but they're really actually partnering with you. This is not
Right.
Right.
about stepping in and having everything worked out. This is about, like, I want
Right.
this marriage. I'm doing my half of it. I'm going to deal
Yeah.
with where I get stuck. Being patient in that has a tremendous sense because it's a patience that's leading to something. A lot of times we
Right.
use
You're
the
calming
virtue of
down to
patience.
allow them to move in,
Right.
right? And have
Exactly.
some agency and choice.
Right. But a lot of times we use the idea of patience to actually just be complicit in not confronting that your partner is not doing anything different and doesn't want to. And as long as they can track, as long as the lower desire person can track that the higher desire person says they want something different, but is just
It's not
kind of
going to do anything about
resentful
it. Yeah.
and isn't willing to do anything differently, then, well, it's easy to just stay complicit with them in the fantasy that eventually something different is going to
Yes.
happen.
How do you get them to do? I have a client that has done all that work, and at first they weren't in a place, right? And I think that's important for us all to talk about. There's a lot of self work that has to happen to get you in a
Always.
place where you're coming from integrity. You're not coming from fear. You're
Yeah.
really coming from integrity. You understand your desires and what you want. They're
Mm.
so afraid that if they reach out to their spouse in this way, that it becomes a threat or
Tomato.
ultimatum.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've talked about how it depends on the intent that you come with it. If you're coming to make
Right.
an ultimatum or a threat, it
Yeah.
will be that way. But you could say
Definitely.
the exact same words and not be threatening because you're literally saying, I need to know to make a choice. What are some of the things that spouses can do to make sure when they get to that place where they're thinking, I don't think this person is going to step in and I've done what I can and I'm in a solid place. How do they come across and make sure they're not being threatening or ultimating?
You have to be confronting yourself, meaning you could get to a place. So, an ultimatum, I mean, I'm not sure actually when it comes down to the actual language because we think of ultimatums as bad. But I think that the real question is, who are we trying to control? Am I trying to
Yeah.
control them, or am
Yes.
I controlling myself in front of them? It's a
Yes.
really
Mhm.
That's
important
beautiful.
distinction.
Yep.
Yeah. So am I trying to scare you into doing something different? And I'm like, I'm not going to be, if you're trying to control them, they're going to feel it. If you're
Right.
Yes.
controlling yourself, they will also feel that. That's the thing. It's so fascinating about human beings is we can track each other in that way.
Yes, we can.
So
And
closely.
so, and listen, you might start out clear, like, I don't think I can keep doing this. I think I need to step, I need to choose out of this marriage or this relationship because I just don't think the other person wants what I want. A lot of times when you actually voice that, you also get anxious and then you move it back into trying to get them, like, I really, really
Yeah.
mean it.
Control them
Did you
again.
hear what I said
Yeah.
yesterday?
Yeah.
So that is
Well,
to
I've
say
seen
we
these
can,
cycles, write letters and like, I'm going to step into it and then, oh,
yeah,
I'll punt it
yeah,
a little farther. And yeah,
yeah,
I've seen that cycle go on and
right.
on.
Because you get anxious too. Because growing into your own psychological autonomy is uncomfortable work, and it's very easy to regress ourselves even if we're the ones bearing more of the pain in the relationship. So
Mhm.
So it's never just like one thing. You have to just watch what you're doing. Anytime you do something in a more self-defining way in a relationship, you could quickly move into other defining, trying to get them to do what makes you
Right.
feel better because your anxiety is going up. And so
Right. And it's so
it's just
tempting to
keeping
move to
track of,
control.
yeah, keep a track of
I
who you're going to control. Mhm.
I often talk about, are you coming at it from curiosity,
Mm.
instead of control manipulation? Are there any other things that you can think of that trigger to make sure you are solid and you're coming out of a curiosity to understand the other person, or if you're really trying to manipulate them to do something?
I think I would just be watching myself afterwards. Is my vigilance on them or is it on myself?
Yeah.
Mm.
Is
Oh,
it on
yeah.
seeing if they're coming towards me or if they're calling their therapist or if they're, or I mean, you want to see what if you're in a situation like that, of course you want to see what the other one is doing. I don't mean you want to be blind to it, but you're not trying to control it. You keep pulling it back to being solid in yourself and really letting them have a choice rather than trying to pressure their choice.
Hmm.
Uh,
Mhm.
Yeah.
you know, I've told this story before, but I think this was, I worked with a couple where he had been married before his first wife died. This was now a second marriage for him and a first marriage for her. There had been a good sexual relationship in the first marriage. Second relationship, she was very much kind of grew up in a religious household, a lot of repression in the mother. And this now adult client very much imitated that in the marriage. So they came to me for help. And we she was saying she wanted help, like she felt broken. I don't want to be broken. I know I'm disappointing him and stuff. But she was really conflicted within herself because a part of her felt like I don't I don't really want to open up to you. I don't want to confront my anxiety about my sexuality. But I don't want you to be unhappy with me. And so she was at cross purposes. Like a part of her was trying to be true to
Mhm.
herself by not doing this and not feeling like she's giving everything up for a man. And then another part of her was like, I don't want to be a disappointment, so I better go to therapy. And she's the one who reached out. Like I think she really did want to, but nothing worked. Like she'd never had an orgasm and things like that. And so everything we would try, it was like a dead end, a dead end, a dead end. Well, I'm working with him as a couple, and eventually he just said, "Listen." And the thing is, he really was in a solid place. That's what was so powerful about it. It's is that he came to a session and said, "I've been thinking about this a lot, and we've been at this for a while, and I think I just need to take no for an answer. Like, I don't think you want this. I think you're trying to get yourself to want it. You don't want it. And I can make my peace enough with it. I don't want to be the pathetic one trying to get you to want something you don't want." And so I thought she would be like, "Hallelujah. Finally, finally, you've released me from this expectation." Well,
Freedom.
no.
Yes.
No, she's like, "Well, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't
Yeah.
want it?" Because she didn't want his attention to go away. She didn't want there to be no eros energy in the marriage. She didn't want there to be no
Yes.
Right.
sexuality. As long as he was revolving around her, she had the
Hmm.
reassurance without the exposure. Once he
Right.
really made that solid position, everything changed because she
Mm.
was like, "Wait a minute. He even said, I'm not going to leave. I mean, like maybe when the kids are gone, I'll choose differently, but I'm here for it for now." And he meant it. I think that was she could feel that too.
That's
Yes.
the important part. Yeah.
But then she was like, "Oh my gosh, do I really want a kind of neutral marriage? Do I really
Yeah.
want co-parenting? No, I don't." And she could see, like, I'm like my mother. This is how my mother was. I'm such a martyr. I would hate it if my son married somebody like me. I mean, she really went into a level of self-confrontation. And then everything changed because now she was like, "No, I want intimate marriage." And she
Right.
couldn't
Mm.
see it until she really understood what it would mean to not have it. Don't try this at home as a manipulation, though. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I think it's so important to get to that point. I think when I was taking your Art of Loving course and I got to the point of validation, I realized I was a validation whore. That's what I call it. And that's all I was seeking was validation. And it really took me to a place where I was tired of being in that position. And I
That
was solid
dependent
enough
position.
that when I came to Amy finally and asked the question, what's hard to be about being married to me? I
Mm.
was ready to be in myself to make that change. And I think that's what you're talking about, is that that husband was solid in himself. He wasn't like, I'm threatening you so that I can see you come to me. He was really willing to,
Yeah,
be in that position. And I told Amy,
that's right.
I'm like, no more sex for out of obligation. I'll wait here. You go figure it out. And people have asked us over and over again, like, how long did you not have sex? And we have
We don't
racked our
remember.
brains and we
Yeah,
cannot even try to figure it
It
out.
wasn't a crucial
That
question at
wasn't
the
the
moment.
question. It was,
yeah,
Sorry.
100%.
I'm
That means
I'm gonna own
something real was
myself.
happening. Yeah,
Yeah, you go own
exactly.
yourself. And I think that's really where you have to be able to ask the question like, hey, I'm not gonna push here. You get to choose, but this is what I'm gonna do.
100%. And I mean, I understand why people ask the question, like, how long did you have to suffer?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
very much the wrong question, even though I really do
Yep.
understand why people are asking it, is because that wasn't the real issue. The issue was, I'm
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
really giving you a choice and I'm making a choice for myself
Yep.
here. Like, I
Yeah.
don't
Yep.
want to be the pathetic beggar anymore. I cannot live with it in myself.
Yep.
And very much what this other male client was doing too. Like, I cannot be trying to get you to want something you don't want. And this is the choice
Mhm.
I can live with here, is this one. But him making a solid choice, she was freed up to make her own.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Very much when he said, I don't want to be this anymore, that really did allow me space to then go, what is it that I really want? And what do I want to create in this marriage? Instead of just reacting to him, it was really like the space to fully
Yes,
make that choice. And so the time wasn't really even what we were working on. It was really like, what is it that we actually want here?
exactly.
And how are we going to choose that? And it was so different than any other conversation I think that we'd really had before that.
Yeah. And that's exactly. And you know, I'm working on a book and I talk about stages of relational development. And when most of us get married in what I would call stage two, there's a lot of different stage theories out there, but the way I think about it is where we're really kind of psychologically entangled with the other. And so I need you to
Mhm.
need me, and I need you to take care of me, and we kind of often engage at that level of psychological entanglement, but it interferes with intimacy. It interferes with freedom in a marriage. It gets old pretty. It's how most people start, but it gets old pretty quickly. And so, if you're really going to have a choice based marriage, you can't be psychologically entangled anymore. You have to start self defining. You have to tolerate disentangling yourself and determining who you are and how you want to live your life. And it's scary. It's why most of us avoid it like the plague. We keep wanting to be what keeps people happy with us, or get them to love us, or get them to validate us. But as we disentangle, which Greg, you're describing in that, like I need to stop trying to get something from her all the, I'm a validation whore. I've got to stop doing that because it's not fair to her. It's not fair to me. I don't want to be that person. And so that self defining means you took more anxiety onto yourself as you do that, because usually we're diffusing it into our relationship to handle ourselves.
Mhm.
Hmm.
If you start taking
Mhm.
it onto yourself, it's scary. That's why a lot of
Yes.
times people regress. But if you can hold on to it, like, I don't know what she's going to choose. It could be very lonely here, me alone in my bed with my integrity, but that might be where it's
It's hot, that integrity for sure.
totally. I know. And, yeah. And so it's like, you have to tolerate that without lashing out into a losing strategy, a way to re-entangle
Mhm.
yourself. And as you do it, it scares and liberates the other person, because now they're
Yep.
like, well, I can't just get a self through being the self-sacrificing wife who has sex with my husband anymore. I've got to figure out another self that I can back up. And
Mhm.
so it is a real gift when a spouse does that, even though it can feel like a terrifying gift,
Yeah.
because then the question of who do I desire to be emerges. And once we've started to move into what is my stage three of self-defining, well, then you're operating from a more solid self that is more able to love and choose and celebrate another person, because you're not so dependent on them to manage your own
Yep.
sense of self.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I found it interesting, and I've seen couples do this, and this is what it was to us because we moved into that, and then we moved on to the other side of the coin, which is just as bad as toxic independence, right? And that's where
Mhm.
you
From
found us.
enmeshment
Yeah,
to toxic.
that's where you
Yeah,
found us at Room for Two. We'd gone through this, we'd kind of separated out, and when we came to you at Room for Two, you're like, "Yeah, you did it, but not really." Right? Like now you're just talking. Now you're roommates and toxic independent, and that's not the
yeah, yeah,
You're
differentiation.
not
That's not ultimate
enmeshed,
either.
but now
Yeah,
you're toxic.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're
No,
in
yeah. It's just
between.
an easy
We're
place to
parallel.
go.
yeah. You're like,
Right.
good job, but not quite.
Well,
Keep
yeah,
going.
because our brains
Yeah.
are often, how to say it, trying to self-regulate, and will look for the same level of functioning. They'll just
Yep.
In a
trick us
new
into
way.
saying it's better and different.
Yeah.
And a lot
Oh,
of
I'm over
times,
here and I don't care. Yeah. It
yeah,
doesn't matter what
exactly.
Amy does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Right, exactly. Yep.
I'm curious about let's create this scenario where a spouse really has confronted themselves. They were entangled, they were enmeshed. There was a lot of anxiety. They were trying to get that from their spouse. They have
Mhm.
confronted this anxiety. They have taken it on, and as they have, they really see that their spouse is incapable. Let's say a health problem. Like there just isn't capacity for the spouse to have the energy to connect, or the capacity. There is like, a very limiting amount there.
Mhm.
And so then they're faced with their lonely integrity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
The disappointment of really so much loneliness,
yeah,
not because their spouse doesn't want to, but because they can't. And then they find themselves in this space kind of thinking like, "Wait, I thought if I did all these things,
right. Yep.
something would shift." It
Yes,
hasn't shifted. What's only become more clear is that it wasn't against me, it just is the reality of what is. And that
yes,
meaning has shifted. And then it seems like they're in a space of, I can stay in this if I choose to to accept the disappointment or the loneliness, or I can leave and tolerate the pain and discomfort of that and the outcome that it may have on our family. And
yeah.
is that does that accurately describe, like, how would you step someone there?
With the way you help people get there is you keep helping them look at what really is, not what
Mhm,
their hopes or their self-deceptions
It's
want.
not a time for fantasies, right?
Yeah,
Right.
the fantasy
Yeah.
that they're gonna change eventually, or
Yep.
this will
mhm,
next year, not now, or, and listen, I think a lot of us have the fantasy and the idea, like, if I do A, B, and C, I'm gonna have the happy, good life. And
mhm.
life is suffering.
50-50, right?
No, I mean, there is a lot of joy in life, but there's a lot of
Yep.
There
pain
is.
and imperfection as well. There's a lot we can do to make our lives richer and full of more love and abundance. And life has a great, tremendous amount of loss and decline in it too.
Yep.
And
Mm,
both are true. So, my point in saying that is that it's not like there's some perfect choice. I think a lot of times we're trying to find the right choice, as in the choice that will make me not suffer is the one that God will tell me is the right one. When
mhm,
often it's about more of that Garden of Eden moment, like there is, which loss can I tolerate better?
To move
mhm,
forward, right? You wanna move forward.
How
mhm,
do I move forward with my integrity intact?
Yes.
mhm,
And those aren't easy questions. And a lot of times we're trying to
mhm,
get someone else to tell us what they are, rather than here's the reality. You are with a partner who either can't or won't choose you. I don't see it changing.
mhm.
The
And
people
can
where,
you accept this or
yeah,
no?
well,
Without the
exactly.
expectation or hope or fantasy that this is
Yeah,
gonna magically
Right.
turn
Right.
around, like, as is, as
yeah,
they are, do you choose this?
right. So I've worked with couples like where there was infidelity, and in this case, the woman had been unfaithful. She kept trying to kind of sell the idea that he was making a big deal over his lack of trust, that he should trust her now, that blah, blah, blah. And the truth was, she really had no interest in stepping back in. She wasn't in a place of remorse or kind of like, I really screwed up and I want this marriage. She just kept exploiting his hope, and he was so eager to hope. And I finally
Mm.
just said, as the third party in there, I don't see any data, and I'm not even judging her. Like, she gets to decide. She doesn't have to choose
Right.
this marriage.
Mhm. Right,
But I
right.
don't see any data that your spouse wants an exclusive, intimate marriage. There's no data that I can see. Now, he was upset to hear that. So was she. Because
Mhm.
she wanted the fantasy in her own mind as well as in his mind, so she could keep
Mhm.
doing her own shenanigans rather
Right.
than here's the reality. And, that was enough for him to get a hold of what can he really live with. I'm either going to live with somebody who's not interested in being faithful, or I'm going to leave somebody who's not interested in being faithful. But that part I don't have a choice over, even though I kept wishing that I could do something that would get her to want to be faithful.
Yep.
Mhm.
And that's just, you just kind of have to hand people their choices. You can feel great compassion for them, because I'm not saying these are easy choices, but they are
Right.
Mhm.
theirs to make.
Yep.
And there
Mhm.
may be issues like the children, my faith, have I done everything that I can? I mean, you might have a lot of questions that are hard to answer and to know the answer to. Would it be better for my kids to stay in a crappy marriage or to leave a crappy marriage? Those aren't easy
Yeah.
questions. Anybody who's saying that they are is not paying
No, they're very
attention.
soul-searching,
Yeah.
very, very self-confronting. Like they are, I think, some of the most difficult questions to
Yeah,
answer.
right. But is there a place I can keep my integrity intact?
Yeah.
Mhm.
What do you do with, and I found this too, mostly on the low desire person, when they say it just takes time, like, and that's a year, it just takes time. And,
Change of
and
heart
I've even had
doesn't
one say,
Change of heart doesn't
yeah,
take time. Development of skills and capacity and self-regulation, that might take some time. But in my experience, change happens mostly in change of heart moments,
hmm,
Mhm.
right? Like you, Greg, saying, I am a
Believing it
validation
can
whore. That's a change of
yep,
heart
happen.
moment. Like you're waking
yep,
up to something and you're like, ugh, I can't do that anymore.
yep.
It's like you
Mhm.
can't unsee it. You're like, ugh, I can't live with that in myself. That's what you were saying.
Mhm.
And I didn't
That
stop doing that right away, right? It took a while
No, it
to
doesn't
get to that
exactly. So
point.
it doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you're like, "You know what? I'm over validation. I don't need it."
But you
I wish
start
it
seeing
happened
it,
like that.
right?
Yeah.
I wish that
Yeah.
happened, but you couldn't unsee it anymore, and you understood,
Yes.
Yes.
I am doing something, and so you were now standing on different ground when you came to Amy and had that
Like a
conversation.
different viewpoint, a
Yes.
different
Yes,
perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like
exactly.
I've
You
seen
moved out of that.
husbands say, "Oh my goodness, I steamroll you all the time and just
Yeah,
take," and they've never seen it. And then once they see it, they're like,
Can't unsee it. Yeah. I
"Oh,
find
yeah,
it in all parts of my life,
oh."
work,
yeah.
school, church, everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So again, doesn't mean you can't regress, and we all regress, especially under enough stress or whatever. But you're more able to see it, stop it, self-regulate,
Yep.
because you're
Mhm.
developmentally in a different place than when you didn't see it at all.
Yeah. We tell
Mhm.
them we mess up all the times.
All
I
the
don't think
time.
the mess up amount has gotten any less. We just recognize it faster. And like you
Yeah,
said,
Move
get
through
back
it
to our
faster
unregressed selves
exactly.
and
That's
resolve
what
things that would take weeks and months. Now it take hours and minutes.
or a
that's right.
conversation.
And
Yeah.
I think
So you're
really
still very
importantly,
human.
that of course, and I think really importantly that what is different is who owns the problem. That's what I would say is a real marker of development. Like, is it like, look, I know when I get upset, I do this. I'm sorry, I just did that. I'm on it. That you've taken it onto yourself. When we're psychologically enmeshed, the problem is on the wrong person's shoulders.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
when we can get it onto our own shoulders, we may falter, we may, drop the ball, forget, try to get our spouse to pick it up. But when we wake up to ourselves, we're like, oh yeah, sorry, that's mine. I'll take that. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think that's what when you were saying that, because I was going to ask you, like, what are some of the signs? And I think that is a true sign when you see
Mm.
that person take the focus off of the spouse and put them on
Exactly.
themselves. That's the change of heart moment. And
That's
until they
right.
do that, they really haven't seen clearly themselves and they're not really willing to make a change.
And that's when couples settle down and when
Mhm.
patience is a virtue at that point, because
Yes,
you're not
Mhm.
yes.
colluding in the fantasy that this is not your problem. You
Yeah.
understand who has what responsibility.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, absolutely.
I see a lot of spouses when they're in that, you're the problem, not me. What they're really asking that spouse is, am I okay? Am I enough? Do you choose me? Like there's so much anxiety in it. And the anxiety is what's really happening, not the question of who did the laundry or the dishes or the frequency of
Yes.
sex. Like that underlying question is what they're trying to get the other person to
Do
answer.
you love me?
Do you love me? Do you choose me? And they really have to answer it first in themselves and
Yes.
take that accountability and ownership. Like you said, bring the anxiety back to them, take it on. I can see I'm trying to get you to do this so that I can be okay. I'm trying to get you to behave this way so that I can be okay. Right. Like they take back that ownership and stop
That's
asking their spouse to tell me I'm
100%.
enough. I'm okay. You
Exactly.
know?
And even the question of like, do you choose me? Like, I can't be here if you don't choose me. So do you? Do you? Is still like fledgling often. I mean, has it? It's still waffling on rather than I can see that you don't. Meaning, if you're
Right.
Mhm.
clear-minded enough, you're not trying to get them to tell you what you want to hear. You're observing what you see. You're
Right.
exposing what you understand, and that's just a different level of kind of clarity. It doesn't mean like I'm God and I speak all truth and you haven't chosen me. I don't mean that. You're just saying I can see that you don't want what I want. You don't have
Yes.
to
Mhm.
want what I want, but I'm going to
Right.
stop trying to get you to want what I want.
Yes, that is so
Like you have,
huge. It's
yeah,
confronting yourself at that moment and saying, yes, because they'll play this for so long, like
right.
still trying to distract it. But if you stop at that moment and say, I can clearly see that you do not want the same things I do, and be very clear in that, I think that's a huge thing.
Hmm. Yep. And you're not saying
And it
it to
really has
punish. You're saying it to
Right, right. You're
that
not trying to
see
get
what's
them.
that's
real.
It's
exactly what I
yes.
was gonna say.
Oh
Without
yeah,
the undertone of, "And
Yeah.
you
exactly.
should."
Yeah.
Yes,
And,
exactly.
"Why don't you?"
Yeah.
And
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. In
That's
that
right.
moment of clarity for me, I wasn't even really concerned what Amy was going to do. I
Yeah.
was really concerned about what I was going to do.
Good.
And that's why the
Yep.
anxiety wasn't on how long is this going to be? How long ago without sex? You know, am I going to be months? There wasn't that
Yes.
because I was just so worried about what I was going to do to be a better person and change my things. And then I
Yes.
was just, you just go figure out whatever you need to go figure out. And that was so different than any other time before. It was
That's right.
just so different.
That's
and
right.
I think I was not worried about, "Oh, has it been, 3 days and I've gotta step in?" Because I was so in my mind of, "What is it
Right.
that I choose?" So that's why I think the time thing, neither of us was tracking time. We were so consumed with our own interpersonal question, like, "What
Yeah.
is going on for me? What do I want? How am I showing?" Like, all of these, like, confronting questions, defining questions, that's what was happening, and so the time was, I don't know, like, completely irrelevant, apparently, because
Exactly.
neither of us can
You weren't
remember.
yet, and you also neither of you were yet capable of what was at stake. And what I mean by that is,
Nope.
let's say, Amy, that your mind went to, oh, it's been 3 days, I better go. Well, if Greg was paying attention, he would be like, no, this is it. This is what I don't want. I don't
Yeah.
want you to
Mhm.
come out of mercy. So that is to say, like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is it, as you're saying, Amy, it wasn't the issue. And if I'd tried to make it the issue, it wouldn't have even worked. Like we didn't want the bad sex anymore, or at least Greg was saying, I
Right.
don't want it. I'm not insulting you, Amy. What I say, I just think the sex
Amy
that
said it was
wasn't.
great.
No, no, I'm saying that the sex that wasn't full of that eros choosing. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, really, it seems like every conversation we talk about, no matter what, it comes back to owning yourself and deciding what you're going to do and putting yourself
Mhm.
in a place of integrity. And once you're
Yes.
there, whatever choice you make, you can deal with it. And that's why I tell a client, like, I'm going to make you the best version of yourself. So if you choose to stay, you will be the best version of yourself. If you choose to go, they can't take that away from you. You own that. You have become the best version of yourself. And if
Yeah.
you don't do that, if you ever try to be in an intimate relationship afterwards, you'll still have the same problems. We have
Yeah.
that fantasy too. Like, I'm going to leave, and the next one, I'm going to find someone. They're going to be so in love with
Yeah.
me,
They're
and
going
it's
to
going
be
to be
so much
great.
better. Mhm.
And it's going
Yeah.
to be
Right.
I've told clients, I'm like, yeah, you could have the hottest person that wants you every day, and you're going to have the same problems because you
Yeah.
have not fixed the underlying
Yeah.
issues.
Yep. Yep. That's right.
Very awesome. We so appreciate you here,
We
Jennifer.
absolutely do.
Yeah.
Thank you so
My
much.
pleasure. My pleasure. I like the.
I cannot wait for your book to come out.
Yeah, we're
Oh,
not trying to pressure you.
Like,
Like, we keep
well,
on
it is.
saying, "Come on,
I
Jennifer."
know it's crazy. It's just I keep thinking it's just like right around the corner, and then I'm like, no, not yet. but it's getting better for me continuing to, it's close. I keep saying it, but it
Good.
really is.
Well, we'd love to have you back on once you get it out and
Sure.
published, so you can talk about it
Great.
and we can celebrate it. But
Great.
again,
And all of
thank you
your
so much.
wisdom. Yes, thank
Yeah.
you. Truly, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy and Greg. You guys have been really fun to work with and interact with around it. So it's great.
Well, we made some pretty big promises,
We did.
and hopefully we delivered for y'all. I know for me, it was a great blessing to sit at the feet of Jennifer Finlayson-Fife and talk about marriages and how we can make them better.
Really ourselves inside that, in the context of marriage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That was probably my biggest takeaway. It really was, when we're at these difficult positions and need to have difficult conversations, whether it's where we talked about where we're at the decision whether we need to stay or go in a marriage or not, the number one thing that shows that we're in a place of integrity is, where are we focusing?
Where's our vigilance?
Yeah, where is our focus on our spouse and trying to change them?
Mm-hmm.
Or is the focus on ourselves, knowing that we can change ourselves and we need to make decisions? And so we're trying to get some information from our spouse to help us make those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And along the whole line, continue to ask and be curious around these things.
And being really clear about where you are, where you stand, not trying to take your anxiety and push it on to your spouse, but saying, hey, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I'm noticing, here's what I'm choosing, here's where I'm at. And not taking your anxiety and trying to diffuse it into the relationship, but actually accepting it. I think that's what I did for so long. I would take my anxiety and I would try and get you to solve it and to lessen it. And it is so problematic. And you had to say, I can't do that for you. And I had to take it back and figure out how to center myself in it. And I think this also happens with actual sexual intimacy too, right? The anxiety of being that close, you had to learn how to take your anxiety back so that we could actually engage without me trying to solve that. There was actually room to actually be intimate.
Yeah, it was a beautiful moment. I think that was a huge takeaway for me, like the words of diffusing anxiety into marriage. I'd seen it in myself. I've seen it in my clients, but I really hadn't put it in those words. And really why it never works is because the marriage itself and your partner can't solve it, right? And so it's another way of, I think, of buffering. And we talk about buffering, trying to get rid of those emotions and anxieties by focusing on something else. Mm-hmm. This is another way, pushing them into the marriage and focusing on something that can't control them. Bring it back to yourself. It's uncomfortable. It makes you want to not go there. Mm-hmm. But really the only way you can actually solve those anxieties is by going there. And again, let's remind everyone that anxiety in itself isn't bad. It's a power to move you forward. It's if we don't deal with it and we allow it to control us instead of us controlling it.
And this is really how marriages are always making us stronger if we allow them, right? Are always developing us, having us face our own insecurities, our own anxieties, our own fears. This is the development.
Yep, absolutely. So we truly do feel like we're practitioners of Jennifer Finlayson-Fife. If you are a huge fan of hers and have learned tons from her and would like some help in applying that in your life, please come visit us on langfordlifecoaching.com. There's a button on every screen, and there's a reason why it's on every screen is because it's really important.
Consult.
It allows you to have a consult with us to be able to see where you are. Again, if we talk about it and we can't help you, so be it. We would love to talk to you. But we would really, really love you to join us in a consult so that we can see where you're at and help you move forward.
Yes. And we also really appreciate it when you leave a review or stars or share with your friends or subscribe and follow along. We love to have you on this journey. And we also appreciate if you email us your questions or where you might be stuck or something that you want us to discuss. Of course, we have lots of things that we can always talk about, but if you specifically have something and you feel like we haven't started talking about it or addressed it, or you feel like, what about ... just email us at Amy at Langford Life Coaching or Greg at Langford Life Coaching.
All right. Until next time.
Keep undressing your intimacy.
Bye-bye.